So guys, welcome back. We are finalizing the network address translation section, aka chapter 4 of the Fortigate study guide for 7.0, right? And this is the security section, okay? And so we're switching up a bit of the cadence for these sessions, right? So sessions that I know that is going to be a little bit complex to recreate and can be, consumed via just reading, I'm going to tell you guys to just read, right? And so those sessions are going to be session helper, as you guys see, in sessions, as you guys see on the screen, okay? So we won't go over that. I'll let you guys do your own reading on that one, and hopefully that influences you to do some other reading on your own, right, within your FORTINET studies. Tonight, we're going to go ahead and review best practices and troubleshooting as it relates to NAT, right? And some of the objectives, right? We need to go ahead and identify common NAT issues by reviewing traffic logs, right? Monitor NAT sessions using diag or diagnose commands, right? Use event filters, right? Or DNAT filters for central NAT, and use NAT implementation best practices, okay? Now, this is according to FORTINET, right? You guys work in the field. You guys that are that already have experience with NAT already, you guys probably have your own tips and tricks. Remember, this is just for the exam, so you guys can pass the exam. So make sure you do consume it. Okay. So first things first, right? One of the things that you may have to troubleshoot, right, with NAT has to do with NAT port exhaustion, right? You guys are probably wondering, when will this occur, right? This will probably occur, right, whenever your FortiGate is unable to allocate any ports, right, that's performing NAT on new sessions, right? Out of nowhere, just, there's, it's probably a building and you're using a form of NAT, right, that's reliant on ports, right? Port numbers. It runs out of port numbers, right, based on your config. And out of nowhere, you're getting your help desk, your service desk is getting tickets, saying, hey, I can't connect to the internet, right? And Don, right, he sees in the CLI or the logs that you guys can see his message meets alert condition, right? And he sees that log ID and the event, right? It says it critical, and it says NAT port is exhausted in bold letters. It's not going to be in red in the CLI, right? But it'll just say in bold, like in big, it'll pop out at you. NAT port is exhausted, right? And so Don, being the FortiGate administrator, right, he'll see that, right, and he'll go ahead and have to address it, right? So he'll talk to Mike Evie and they'll work together, right? And what you guys can do to go ahead and address this issue, right, to troubleshoot this issue, is go ahead and do one of the following options, right? You can either A, create a new IP pool that has, right, maybe another external IP tied to it, right? And so it'll go ahead and load balance, right, those sessions, right, across from them, or go ahead and reduce the number of sessions that require NAT, right? But it's not as easy as it sounds, because that'll be an architectural change, right? A design change, right? But at least you guys know how it's supposed to look like, right? I just need you guys to understand, and especially for the exam, what NAT port exhaustion looks like, okay? And so at the first bullet point, you see what the log looks like, right? But my favorite commands, the diag commands, right? Mike Evie can go ahead and go into CLI and put a diag sys session stat, right? And what will happen, she will go ahead and see some info, right? And what she will see is, if you guys see what's in red, she'll see the clash number being anything above 0 will indicate, right, that some sessions have been rejected because the NAT port is exhausted, right? Now take a screenshot of this, right? Remember this and what have you. And it's kind of hard to replicate in your lab. You'll probably need a box that can, probably a Kali Linux box that can go ahead and replicate multiple sessions at the same time, but you can replicate this, and this has been seen, and you are able to troubleshoot and fix this by the two options that I shared with you, okay? If you're not comfortable with the CLI, right? You can go ahead and go into log and report on the FortiGate and go to log settings, and you can go ahead and take a look at a few things. One thing you always want to keep in mind that I want to make sure that you guys understand, this is outside of the exam. You have to make sure that for all your logs, right, you're logging it to either a a disk, aka USB, that's maybe plugged into your FortiGate. I highly recommend that. If you're using FortiAnalyzer, that works as well. Or just logging to the memory that's on the box. And of course, it'll get archived after a while, but make sure that it's turned on and activated for all traffic, all events, just so you guys can go ahead and track when something like NAT port exhaustion happens. Okay. All right. So carrier grade NAT, right? You guys have seen this before, right? And it's typically things that people that work for an ISP, right, or an MSP that manages multiple customers have to do to go ahead and meet a certain SLA or what have you, right? And so, we'll start talking about QRAD or traffic shaping that needs to be done per customer, right? And maybe, we need to go ahead and set that for their outside connections. This is what they call carrier grade NAT, right? And so if Mykevia, right, owns an MSP and she has multiple customers and she talks to the ISP and say, hey, this is how much they can handle, et cetera, et cetera. Now Mykevia is doing the architectural design and saying, hey, we need to go ahead and traffic shape at this much bandwidth, right? This is the maximum bandwidth that can go throughout that pipe. This is the maximum amount of connections, concurrent connections that can happen through this pipe, right? And these are all options that you can go ahead and create within your traffic shaping policies. Okay.
What
You can also
happens if oh,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
what happens if the traffic exceeds that number?
Good question. It will be dropped.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good question. Um, and of course, right, there is a way, right, that you can do carrier grade NAT within a IP pool, right? And of course, if you see on the right, this is a perfect example. And this is so funny. I'm looking at this because when I worked at a NOC, it took me almost 4 days. It took me 4 days to do this. But it finally got done. And as you guys can see, right, I know it's kind of small, but fixed port range, right? And this is another way to go ahead and limit, right, the amount of concurrent connections, right? And you'll say how many ports per user, right? And you'll share the internal IP range. Of course, it'll be larger than that in a realistic environment. But this is carrier grade NAT at its finest. Now, the option to the left, traffic shaping, I'm sorry. It takes a little bit more experience, right? For the exam, I just need you guys to understand what that is, right? And what traffic shaping is doing, it is making sure, right? It's a per IP shaper, right? And you're telling it, hey, what's the maximum number of concurrent TCP and UDP sessions that I'm allowing, right? And that number could be from 0 all the way to 2 million and such, right? And of course, you can always set it to 0, meaning that it's no limit, right? All of these configuration things you can go ahead and try in your lab. Okay. What questions do you have? All right, I'll keep going. All right. Well, right. So with NAT, right, every time, everything is not about, of course, just troubleshooting. There is probably some time you just want to go ahead and monitor what your NAT is doing, right? You can go ahead and put the command diag firewall IP pool all list, right? And you'll be able to list all the configured NAT IP pools, NAT IP range, and type, basically everything that you may configure in the GUI, right? You can go ahead and see in the CLI. Okay. All right, simple enough. And again, some of these commands you will need to know for the exam. All right, so definitely review this, go back and take a look at it, right? And so this is a little bit more, right? Continuing on the last slide, right? You can go even further, right, with this diag command, right? You can go ahead and take a look at NAT sessions per IP pool that are currently active, right? That are currently stateful, that is passing through the firewall. You can see, right, a summary of total TCP sessions per IP pool, total for the UDP, right, and for others, right, non-TCP and non-UDP per pool. You can take a look at all of this, right? And if you guys are probably wondering, when will I use this, right? There will be a time where maybe out of nowhere, we were just talking about SIP earlier, that we're seeing SIP traffic, right, not passing through. And one of your checklists for troubleshooting is to look at, to make sure traffic is passing through and it's being natted. Alongside with a packet capture, you want to go ahead and maybe you don't see traffic coming out, right, of egress that's going out to the internet. You want to go ahead and check your, you want to go ahead and put in this command and actually see if the firewall policy is acting on the internal private IP addresses and translating to the outside. So you will use this command at some shape or form. Okay. So for the exam, make sure you remember it, make sure you know it, try it, practice it over and over again to the second nature. All right. And last but not least, our VIP optional filters. You can go ahead and what I like about VIPs, right, aka destination NAT, right, is the service option has been added in 7.0. Before 7.0 and 6.4. What is it? 6. I think that was my favorite code train. And maintenance release is that now you can go ahead and put service objects inside of DNAT to tell it what you want it to do, right? Very powerful, right? And what does it do, right? You can go ahead and allow complex scenarios, right? Maybe Don has 2 customers, right, that use, that use RDP, but they're using Fort 33802, right, and 33805, right? And they're just using one external address that we own. Don can go ahead and program that has a VIP, right, and put those as services inside this VIP all in one, right? But he can have another, right, another VIP that's using the same external IP address, apply different services, and it'll reply, right, and it'll pass traffic for that, right? He can apply it to another policy. This is what is so beautiful, right, about these different releases, right, and adding these optional filters to virtual IPs. So just remember for the exams, right, the service option has been added as an optional filter for VIPs. Okay.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
So like you see right here with when you're creating the VIP and you add it to services like the ports. Now, when I'm applying that to the VIP to like a policy, do I
Yes.
still have to add those services, like those ports, into the policy
Great question.
when it's applied to the VIP?
Great, Don. That is, listen, I want to give you a hug right now. That is an amazing question because a lot of people don't know. So the VIP, right? Your VIP is going to override within the policy.
Okay.
Okay. So in the policy, just leave it as all. You can go ahead and put all. And your VIP is going to take precedence. I just tested this past weekend.
Oh wow.
That's why I know building
Oh
out my
wow. Okay.
at work, building out the development environment. So in the firewall policy, right, you can go ahead and say all in the firewall policy, but your actual VIP is going to take precedence. And if, let's say, you have maybe a host that's trying to reach this DNAT, this VIP, but services you only allowed what's 443 and SSH. They're trying to connect using port 80, and we're seeing decline. But we see all in the firewall policy. Absolutely not, right? Because it's an if-then criteria for a firewall policy.
Okay.
So the FortiGate is looking, right? It's looking at everything and it's stopping at that destination, and it's looking inside the destination. It's going to, because it hasn't reached the bottom yet. That's why services is below destination address, right? And so it's going to look at the DNAT, and everything that Don created in the VIP is saying, okay, I'm checking port forwarding, I'm checking services, I'm checking what time is allowed in his VIP object, right?
Okay.
Then, right, if he has something specific there, I'm going to use that. I'm not going to use all. But if he does not have anything specific there under optional filters and services, I'm going to go ahead and use all as well.
Got you.
Does that make sense?
Make perfect sense. Yep.
Okay. All right. So, with that being said, go ahead. Last but not least, couple of best practices. I'm not going to read this out to you guys. I think you guys can read. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys one question to end out the next section. All right. So, question 1. An administrator wants to check the total number of TCP sessions for an IP pool named internal. Which CLI command should the administrator use, right, to go ahead and check the total number of TCP sessions? Is it A, diagnose firewall IP pool - all stats internal, or is it B, diagnose firewall IP pool - all list internal? There's a hint on the screen if you guys are looking at it.
It's stats. So
there you go. Absolutely.
Oh, I didn't even catch that. Okay.
Right.
Say the question one more time, though.
I got you. An administrator wants to check the total number of TCP sessions for an IP pool named internal, right? An IP pool named internal. Remember that, Doc. Which CLI command should the administrator use? Is it A, diagnose firewall IP pool - all stats internal, or is it diagnose firewall IP pool - all list internal?
Oh, stats. Okay.
There we go.
I see it. Yep.
Okay. All right. So, with that being said, you guys are complete with the NAT section. Of course, I do encourage you guys to go ahead and read the session helper session and the session so you guys can look at that, take a look at that, lock it in, write some notes about it. But we are now moving on to the firewall authentication section, and we will start that on Saturday. All right. All right, guys. No problem. You guys have a great night.
Thanks. Take care, guys. Bye.